Welcome back to another episode of The Conscious Artist, a safe space for conversations around mental health awareness for musicians, artists, and all human beings. I am your host, Pallavi Mahidara. I'm a concert pianist and teacher, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining us today. My hope for this show is that it will give all of us a sense of solidarity and knowledge that we are not alone, and together, through these conversations, we can create more awareness and change for a healthier future. Honest disclaimer, I am majorly fangirling over today's guest. He is an American pop rock singer-songwriter, record producer, and pianist. He has released several albums over his career, tours regularly, and is co-host of the podcast Dadville with fellow musician Dave Barnes. I can't say more without giving him away, so please join me in welcoming one of my all-time favorite artists, Jon McLaughlin. Jon, I'm thrilled to have you here on the show with us today.
Thank you. That is so sweet. Thanks for having me on.
It is really my pleasure. This is super cool for me because, firstly, you have been one of my all-time favorite non-classical artists for almost 15 years. And I only specify non-classical because I spent most of my life until college not knowing or listening to anything outside of classical music. And it's actually thanks to one of my best friends for introducing me to your work. We were students at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philly at the time and totally ditched some classes to come see you perform at World Cafe Live.
Good. You still graduated?
Still graduated. I think it was back in 2008. And I remember very clearly when you started playing your song, Why I'm Talking to You, which is one of my favorite songs, because I remember thinking, oh, he can also play piano. Cool.
I'm really trying up there. I'm really trying to play. Well, I'm glad that I didn't know that you were in the audience, because it would, anytime that I know, I have obviously lots of musician friends. Anytime I have really great piano players who I know are in the crowd at any given show, it just kind of freaks me out a little bit. You know what I mean? Because I know that they know any little thing that I do, or if I like try something and I don't quite land it, I'm like, I know that they know what I tried to do and I didn't land. You're just always like, it's like I'm watching the show through their eyes.
I think I've told you this before, but I've always appreciated your classical training and that you share videos of playing classical works because, as you know, classical music is my life. And so I do appreciate when I see non-classical artists respecting the value of classical music.
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, I have to say, I grew up studying classical, and I use that term rather loosely. Like when I got to college, I started getting a little bit more serious and intense about it. But I love classical music. And I see anyone like you who is in that world, I'm looking at you guys like just rock stars. I'm just like, I'm so fascinated by the world of classical music. And I'm so fascinated by it's almost like the yin to the yang of my sort of singer-songwriter, loose, kind of like subjective world of music. Because like whatever given piece that I'm learning, there is a way to play it because it's right here on this page. These are the notes. There are no other notes. There are no blue notes. This is how you play it. And then you guys get up on stage and you play it note for note. It just blows my mind. Because I get up on stage and I do my thing, and it might be different. I mean, it's going to be different every single night. And I'm going to make little mistakes or whatever. And that quote unquote mistake, it's like, no, that's just a different, that's the way I played that A7 tonight, with a B flat in it or whatever,
I find it so incredibly impressive when I watch like jazz pianists or pianists from other genres that are just improvising and just going to town at the piano and having just an incredible time. And like the ability to be able to make split-second decisions on stage. Yes, I do that. I do that every time with the interpretations that I am trying to give to the pieces. And, I'm reacting to how the energy I feel from the audience, even though my audience is silent, but I do react to that energy and to the acoustics and how the piano is and how I'm feeling that day. But I don't know. I have so much respect for every other genre.
Same. And I do feel like the through line of all of it or one of, is I was just talking about this with Dave Barnes, my co-host of Dadville, who's also a musician. We were talking about the head being sort of like the entrepreneur that like founded some company, some startup, right? That's the startup is learning the piece or writing the piece or whatever. And then once the company is up and running, the worst thing in the world is for that CEO or whatever, the founder, to come and start micromanaging what's happening. It is the worst. Like when you're up on stage, especially when I'm on stage during a show and I go into some kind of a Chopin piece just for a minute and my heart rate is just like racing because I'm like, I'm playing a Chopin piece right now. It's like the trick is just to keep your mind out of it and like stay in the actual moment of it. And then you'll be fine because you know how to play the piece. You've played it a million times. You know how to play the piece. But when you start trying to play the piece, all of a sudden you can't play the piece anymore.
When we get in our heads.
Exactly. Yeah. It's such a tricky little dance.
It's so funny you say that because, I rarely get to have such an insight into a non-classical artist's world. And with the classical music world, it's so small. I mean, we all know each other or of each other, and we have like very few degrees of separation.
Mm-hmm.
But from classical music crossing over to any other genre, for us, it feels like a completely different realm. And yet, I'm sure that we share some similar experiences, pressures, anxieties, possibly even traumas across genre. So I'm really, really curious and excited to chat with you today.
Hey, I'm an open book.
Well, I wanted to ask, just to start us off, would you mind sharing with us your earliest connections with music and how it all started?
Yeah, so I am the youngest of three. Kind of grew up in a pretty musical family in Indiana, central Indiana. And my dad, his side of the family is where, a lot of the music comes from. So he always played in bands growing up. He actually met my mom when he like left college to go on tour with his band, and he was playing a show and my mom was at the show and they met and then they got married. And then here we are. So my brother, I've got an older brother, Jeff, who's 6 years older, and then my older sister, Megan, who's right in the middle of us. They were taking piano lessons, and I think that's how it started, was in the beginning, they were taking piano lessons. We had a piano in the house, but I was too young. I was 4, so my parents are like, eventually he'll do piano lessons, but he's not ready yet. And there was one day where we came home from church, and I sat down at the piano, as I had before, and, bang out, nonsense. But they realized I was playing the melody of the hymn that we had just sung at church. So they were like, okay, he has some sort of propensity for this thing and some kind of ears. So I started taking lessons, and I hated practicing. I'm like the opposite end of the spectrum of my brother and my sister, who are both way more self-disciplined and responsible. And my brother especially is just a great reader, and I'm a terrible reader, but I have a good ear, and he plays more by reading. And so I would always try to just play the same pieces that my brother was playing because I could just hear him practicing, and then I could kind of, go to my lesson on Thursday and do I could fake my way through it a little bit. I'd get the high points or whatever. So that's kind of how it started. And music was kind of, because I was a piano player in the Midwest of America, it was a totally different experience than being like a guitar player, because my guitar player friends, the couple of them, they started bands and they would be jamming in their parents' garage, stuff like that. It's just a totally different experience for the piano player. That's like, yeah, everyone's taken piano lessons at some point and then they all quit and then we go play basketball. Like that's the arc that is supposed to happen. And I mean, thank God for my parents, because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to quit and just play sports. And they, somehow kept me in the game until I got to college. And then I sort of like took ownership over it, started, getting into classical. That's when I started writing songs. And then, I've been doing the same thing ever since. So.
Wow, I love that. And it's funny that you say that that your parents at 4 was too young, because I actually started when I was 3.
Yeah, you hearing that is like, what were they doing? They had their eye off the ball.
Not at all.
You lost 18 months. I'm behind. It's true. You guys in the classical world, you start so early.
You start very young. We
Yeah.
do. And it's a lot of, I mean, as you mentioned, it's a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of discipline and perseverance and also a lot of self sacrifice. And, I
Mm-hmm.
had decided, I think by the age of 10, that I'd wanted to be a concert pianist. And it was just something that kept me going nonstop. I love that there's so many non classical artists that are so incredible at learning by ear.
Mm-hmm.
I always find that really fascinating because, yeah, you can give me a piece of music and I can learn it extremely quickly. I can learn it in a day or two or something, depending on how long it is. And,
Yeah.
and I can memorize it and I can play it. But my ability to learn by ear, or as I said, to improvise or just to kind of let go and have fun is very different.
Right.
Because that's not how I'm trained.
Right. Right. Well, and it feels like, I mean, I'm sure there are people out there for sure, but I don't know. I don't know if I personally know or have experienced a musician who can kind of do both at a super high level. You know what I mean? Because it's to do what you do at that level, you have to be so all in on that part of your brain firing that I don't know. It's like God didn't give both. The world would break. We can't have that much talent in one person. But I'm sure there are probably people out there.
I know a few classical musicians that can improvise so incredibly well. And
Well, I don't want to meet them. I don't want to be around people that talented.
it's too much.
It's too much.
But I remember reading online, and I need to know what happened because as a pianist, the thought of an injury is like devastating.
Yeah,
You shattered your wrists at some point. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I did. It's a buckle up for a anticlimactic, disappointing story because that term, whenever someone asks me about it, they always use that term, shattered. And I have to give credit to Island Def Jam PR department for ingraining that word shattered. I remember meeting with them and kind of tell them, the PR department, they're hoping for a story. They don't like, you write great music, great. That's neither here nor there. We need a story. Were you homeless growing up? Great, we can work with that or whatever. I was like, guys, I got nothing. I mean, my parents are great. I love them. I broke my wrists and they were like, hold on, hang on a second. You what? No, you shattered your wrist along with your dreams, John. I was like, no, it really wasn't that. And they're like, no. So I was in high school. I was really into rollerblading. I don't know how many of our listeners here can, I don't know if the classical, music rollerblading world has a lot of overlap, but I was way into rollerblading and I was rollerblading in my driveway and I fell. Now, I will say, just to punch up the story a little bit, I was doing a pretty awesome trick where I was going backwards and I was up on my front two wheels. Okay, so not a lot of people can do it. And I fell. I hit like a crack on the driveway, and I fell backwards. And I like just instinctively just put my arms just straight back, and I just smashed both of them. And it actually, I was in like double casts for a couple months. It wasn't that big of a deal, and it actually came at kind of a great time because, at that point it was 10 plus years of me begging my parents to let me quit music. I just didn't want to. There was no bridge between what I was learning at piano lessons and any sort of social capital. You know what I mean? If anything, this was a liability that I was a nerdy piano nerd.
Welcome to my world.
Right. I know. I needed to grow up where you grew up. I'd be all in. And they, after the injury, they never pressed me on music again. When I got my casts off, they bought me a Fender Strat. So they gave me this guitar, and I think this was their way of just being like, we feel like we can't push the piano thing anymore. We just want him to stay in music somehow. I think they're like, he's an idiot right now. He's a teenager. He's not seeing, like, John, you're not going to be in the NBA. Like, let the dream die. Here, take a guitar, just somehow stay in music. But I sort of gave up music for a couple years and then found it kind of on my own and took ownership of it. So that's the story. I wish I was, saving some child from a burning building, but just me rollerblading in my driveway.
Well, honestly, I mean, that makes me feel a little better.
Uh-huh.
And yes, I did read that on Google. So, yes, shout out to your PR
Yeah.
team.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but when I was 16, I broke my thumb, my left thumb, by accidentally slamming the car door on it because I was in a rush.
Oh.
It was, yeah,
Oh.
exactly. and it broke in 3 places right here. And I think I was about 6 weeks away from a performance with orchestra. And
No. Would that have been your first performance with an orchestra?
no, the first performance was when I was 10, and that's when I decided I wanted
Okay.
to
Okay.
do
Yeah,
it as a
that'll do
career.
it.
It was a whole story.
Yeah.
But no, when I was 16, I was actually supposed to be performing in China with an orchestra, Cézanne's second piano concerto. And I was so determined to make sure that I got to that concert that I did everything the doctor said. I wore the splint. I drank so much milk to like help my bones be stronger and grow. And I was like continuing to practice with my right hand and everything. And then it actually ended up healing in like 4 weeks.
Really? And you played
I
it?
was able to perform.
Wow. Do you have any lingering, pain or anything from that injury?
No, I actually don't. And I think it was because I was young.
It's all the milk.
It was all that milk.
If you drink enough milk, you can get over it. Wow.
I mean, I wish that were really true, but I think I was just young enough.
Yeah.
I have suffered another injury from playing in my left hand, like in my left tendon. And that came from
just overplaying,
overstretching, and not practicing with my brain. And that was many, 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 many years ago. And I've talked about it in other episodes, but that's partly why this podcast came to be, because mental and physical health are really important to me. And I think it's important that we talk about the kind of things that we didn't learn growing up from our lessons.
Right.
And
right.
Yeah, so I really, it's so nice to hear someone else's story and someone else's process pursuing music, because I think we can probably draw a lot of parallels. And something that I want to ask you about is about rejection, because I think rejection is something that's fundamental and universally experienced as an artist. And in the classical music world, rejections come from, competitions, auditions, not being accepted into music schools or programs, etc. And for us, for example, if we have a memory slip on stage or we hit a bunch of wrong notes, it can often send especially young musicians down this like really negative thought spiral of like, oh, I had a memory slip. I played so terribly. I'm a terrible pianist. I'm a terrible person.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes down that rabbit hole really fast. And, of course, as we know, those kind of destructive thoughts can be crippling as an artist. And so I'm curious to know, if you don't mind sharing, what have been some of your experiences with rejection, and how have you experienced any of those kind of negative thoughts, whether it was growing up or with music, and how have you learned to manage them?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's a lot to say on that. I was doing an episode of our podcast yesterday, and we were talking about basically this very same thing in the context of the question was, are we people who live with a lot of regret? Which is whenever that question comes up, or whenever I, think about it, my knee-jerk reaction is to think I'm not someone who lives with a lot of regret. I don't feel like I have a lot of regrets. That's not to say that I haven't done regrettable things. I've done a million things that I wish I had done something different. I just don't feel like I focus and fixate on it. But I do sort of, in thinking of this question of regret, I realized I always have one kind of running regret. And it happens to be that they're career related. And one of them was, so for example, in 2008, I sang at the Academy Awards. And I've never done anything that has been that public. It's I forget the numbers now, but you fly into LA a week before, and you do a ton of press, and you do a ton of rehearsals. And every interview that I would do, they would talk about at some point how many viewers around the world, will be watching. And there's something terrifying about, a lot of people are terrified of public speaking and being in a room with people. And I don't know how you feel about this, but it's way less terrifying to be in front of an audience. It could be 30,000 people or 30 people. It's kind of the same.
Yeah.
It's just people out there. That's manageable. I can see that's like the devil I know. There's something terrifying about millions and millions of people that you cannot see around the world watching. There's just something like out of your control about that.
Yes.
And I was getting in my head about it for sure. And I remember being on stage, the curtain is drawn, and I can hear them. Patrick Dempsey is announcing the song. And I remember standing on my little riser, just being so nervous out of my mind, and never been that nervous before in my life. And I sang the song. And the truth of it is, it was fine. Like, the performance was fine. It was a solid B performance, maybe. But it haunted me for over a decade, that actual performance.
Wow.
Because I felt like if it was a B, it was an F. I mean, it was that's your moment. You've sang this song a million times, and then you go up and you kind of botch it, And I think that the reason why it was so impactful is that it has so much more meaning to who I am as a person. Like, I am, as you were saying, like, it's not just that I didn't sing that song super well. It's that I am now someone who steps up to the plate when it matters and I can't deliver, And as the years have gone, growing older, definitely having kids, having a great wife helps with all of this. Maybe kids the most, because it just puts everything in perspective a little bit, in terms of your priorities and what matters, and really what my identity is. And it's not that I've overcome it because I, really dove in introspectively and did the work and wrestled it and came out the other side. It's really that I just replaced an identity that is important to me with a more important identity. But it still is something that, I wrestle with every day, rejection. And again, at the root of it is just identity. It's like if your identity as a person is attached to some of these just moving variables, as it's so easy to do, especially as artists and performers, because it's not just, when I get up on stage, it's like, that's my name on the marquee. My name is on the ticket. That's my name. It's not a band name. It's not some project name. It is very close to who I am. And so it's so easy for me to take any given outcome of any given event or performance or whatever and take it as, oh, well, that's a commentary on me as a person.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that story. And honestly, it's so funny that you bring up identity, because at the end of my first season, I spoke with a cognitive scientist who has her own podcast, which is fantastic, called A Slight Change of Plans.
Yeah.
Her name is Dr. Maya Shankar. And Maya and I actually played in an orchestra together when we were 10 and 12. And so we've known each other for almost 25 years.
She injured her hand, right?
Exactly.
Playing.
Yes, exactly. And we talked about identity foreclosure, this concept of identity foreclosure, and how so often, as you say, especially as artists, we tend to attach our identity to what we do.
Right.
And I'm still guilty of this. I mean,
yeah.
I introduce myself to someone new, and the first thing I say is, I'm a pianist.
Right. Yeah.
That is how I identify myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard. It's really hard to try and break away from that, because music takes up 99% of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I can't live without. Mm-hmm. So then, who am I without that?
Right. Well, and I would say it's tricky. I mean, you're totally right. When you introduce yourself as a pianist, I can sort of see that. And anytime that someone comments on that, how we do that in societies, I'm like, yeah, we shouldn't do that. I can see the disconnect there and all that, but it's especially tricky. I feel like, obviously, I can only speak for myself, but it's especially tricky for music because, I don't know. I don't want to speak disparagingly about any other occupation, but let's just say I was like super into golf or something like that, or weightlifting or something. I don't know, the time on that, or basketball or whatever. I'm a finance guy. That seems to me like an easier target. You could say like, "Hey, I'm John. I'm a hedge fund manager," or whatever. You could say to that guy like, "Well, that shouldn't be your identity, that you're a hedge fund manager." But with music, it is such this sacred, divine, alive thing that is a part of all of our lives, whether you're a musician or not. Music is this like miracle. So there is like a healthy, strong attachment to it that I think we should have. And that's like what it's there for. It's there to be attached to us and to affect us and move us. And thankfully, we get to be in the business of creating music and sort of like, kicking the ball down the road in history more. But it's just a slippery slope because it's the same as the hedge fund manager. Like, we shouldn't be introducing ourselves as, "Hey, I'm John, I'm a musician." There's so many other things that I would prioritize if I were pressed. If someone were to say like, "Was that the most important thing in your life?" I'd be like, "Well, no." But, well, why'd you introduce yourself as that? I don't know. I'm not sure how we fix that societally, but I agree with you that it's at least important for us to observe it and be aware that that's a habit that we do without even thinking about it.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the first thing that we ask when we meet someone. What's your name? What do you do?
Yeah.
Because perhaps it's a way to start conversation. But as you say, I think for a lot of other fields, I think as musicians and as artists, most of us are doing what we do because we love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think most of us are very aware how lucky we are to have the opportunity to do what we love as a job,
right,
and not even call it a job.
Right. Yeah.
But it's funny because and again, I can't speak for you, but based on what you said, I'm guessing that for people like us and other musicians, other artists, it's part of our purpose in life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's why I think I have always identified myself as a pianist, as a musician, as an artist. And it was funny because I was telling Maya in the episode that when I was younger, I thought my purpose was to play piano. And as I got older, I thought it was okay to share my music with audiences, with students. So whether it's on stage or teaching. And when I started this podcast, I realized maybe my purpose is just to share.
Mm-hmm.
And she said something so beautiful. She said, "I hope you can play piano for the rest of your life, but I know that you can share for the rest of your life."
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was a very poignant way of thinking about what we do on a day-to-day basis and how we are trying to contribute with what we do. Because as we both know, at the end of the day, our fields can also take their tolls. I mean,
Right.
there is a lot of pressure. And, going back to pressure, I'm really curious to know, based on what you said, I'm wondering if maybe our experiences are more similar than I realized. For classical musicians, the most pressure we feel, I think, is very much on stage and live performance, because it's really make or break for us there.
Yeah.
And we're constantly expected to perform to perfection every concert. I mean, even the absolute top artists.
You're just solidifying that I could never dive into your world. It just would never happen.
No, but I mean, but I know that you face your own type of pressure. And so I'm really curious to know where it is for you. Is it also on stage, as you mentioned, at the Academy Awards? Is it also on stage? Is it more about like album releases and record sales? Where is it felt the most for you?
I would say that I personally feel like my parallel to that is not on stage. Although I definitely have my times, especially if I'm playing, I play with a band and solo about 50-50 and love them both equally. But when I'm on a tour where I'm playing solo, there are moments sometimes. Again, this is the head coming down from the corner office and getting involved and messing everything up. I have these moments where I'm mid song and I'll just have the thought like, all it would take to ruin this show is for me to just mess up or just stop. Or like, what if I forget what's the bridge? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
when you become so aware of how, oh, you're in this moment, you're on stage. There are people out there. This is happening in real time. It's not those flashing moments that I have, are the closest that I come to what you're describing your world. But again, my world is so subjective, and if I want to change this section, or I want to end it this way, or I want to go into this song, or whatever. But I feel like where I feel that pressure is songwriting, and specifically lyric writing to me. Because, and right now I'm in a phase where I'm writing again. And I started a couple years ago, I started writing these kind of classical sounding piano instrumental songs called Mood. And I've done 2 of them. So I'm working on Mood 3. And Mood has been so cathartic to me to sort of bridge the gap between all the classical stuff that I grew up on and love so dearly, and sort of bring it into my day to day, like my quote unquote job, And I've really, really loved it. And coming during the pandemic, it's just been so great, and has like even solidified my like love affair with the piano even more. But I can feel it slowly sort of seeping into that toxic sort of, cycle of writer's block. And, well, now you've already kind of done that. Let's do something different. And again, not to, beat a dead horse here, but it just seeps into the identity part of it. It's like, as I'm writing in real time, my identity is on the line. Like, are you an artist who can create beautiful things, or are you gonna do that again? Because that seems like a second string version of what you put out last year. That kind of a thing. So that's where I kind of feel the pressure, because that's sort of those modes that we can get in where we aren't worrying about the stuff that doesn't matter, and we're just sort of in the element. It's such a slippery thing that it just slips out of your hands so quickly. So I think as I get older, I just have tried to learn to just enjoy those times, and whatever I can do to have those times be more frequent, I do. But yeah, that's kind of my experience with that, with pressure.
Yeah. We talk about it often in the classical music world that one of the best ways to combat anxiety or nerves or these negative thoughts that start to appear, whether it's on stage or off stage, is preparation.
Right.
And for us,
right.
that means, really practicing, really learning well, technically, physically, musically, whatever it is we want to do. But in your case, when you're performing and you go on tour, you're singing the same songs, the same set of songs over and over again. Do you feel that gives you enough preparation? Like, I remember recently you did like a series of concerts, which I was lucky enough to watch a little bit online, but you did a series of concerts where you sang like, I don't know how many of your albums back to back.
Yeah, we did. Well, when we set up these shows, I was going to do all my albums, and then COVID hit, and we had to delay for 2 years. And so in that 2 years, I put an album out. So technically, I didn't do all 7 of my albums, but we did 6. And then I would do, during encores, I would do some of the new stuff. But I think it was 82 songs total in 3 days.
Yeah, that's crazy for me. Like, how do you remember all of the songs, all of the melodies, all of the harmonies, all of the words, how do you remember all of that?
Well, going into it, so once it was done, once the last note of the last show was hit, I immediately wanted to do all of it again, because all the while I'm like, I don't know if I can do it. I mean, that's a lot of songs. I think there were 12 or 13 I had never played before. So I don't know if I can remember all of it. And really, it just came down to confidence. I just had to like will myself to have the confidence that I can do this. Like, those songs are in there. I wrote those lyrics. I know they're in there. The only way that I'm going to forget them is if I try to remember them. So just let it go. I can't, whenever I do a show, whether it's full band or solo or orchestra or whatever, the number one thing that I'm concerned about has nothing to do with the music. I'm never concerned with the music. I'm never concerned with the notes that I'm singing or whatever. I'm only concerned with the flow of the night and and what I think hinges hinges on two main things. One is the set list, and two is the banter in between songs. And I may put too much importance on those two things because I think there is a lot of grace coming from the audience that I deny myself. But what was tricky about those 6 shows is this is not the set list that I would prefer. Like, we were doing all the albums in their order. So a lot of times we were playing and I'm like, I mean, this is fine for the album order. This is a terrible set list. Like, we're doing a slow song 5 minutes after we've got on stage. Like, this is not how I would like to do it. And there are just too many shows and too much time on stage for me to really sort of like conceptualize and arc out the banter and the like, here's when so I really just had to like let go and just don't try to put on a great show. Don't try to do any of that. Just get on stage and play this music and we'll see what happens. And maybe I, at show number 4, halfway through, I will completely stop and say to the audience, guys, I'm sorry, I don't even know. Like, the piano doesn't even make sense to me. My brain is fried. I need to go to the hotel. But that didn't happen, thankfully, and it was great. So now that I know that I can do it, I want to go do it again. But I think I was able to be present enough that it really was a great experience, and I'm glad I did it. And I slept for like 12 hours the next night.
Wow. Honestly, if we walked off mid-concert, you can only do that if you're one of the absolute top, most respected performers, and it's for a very significant reason, or otherwise you're canceled. We can't do something like that. We don't have that kind of control and power. And so I think it's really awesome that you do, and that you do have that ability to enjoy on stage. And it's something that I think about a lot, because for classical musicians, we absolutely love what we do, most of us. And we love what we're playing, and when we're performing, it's exhilarating, it's exciting, it's rewarding, it's challenging, it's incredibly powerful. But I don't think most of us would use the word fun to describe performing. And when I see musicians of other genres performing, I have the sensation that those artists are having an incredibly fun time performing, and basically it's no stress. And so it's really interesting to hear what's going on in your head during that, because for me, really, it feels like you're just having a blast.
Yeah. Well, and I would say a lot of the time, unless you're at show number 1 of a tour, show number 1 is super stressful. Then show number 2 on is great. Show number 1, I'm always like, I can't believe they just opened the doors to the venue. What have we done? I don't know what I'm doing. It's like I've never done this before in my life. And then I walk out on stage and it starts and it's fine, But yeah, I wonder that about classical musicians. Again, I've said this many times just in this conversation, but I mean, just the fact that you are expected to be, is a more accurate way to say it, perfect. And the people in the audience know the piece that you're going to play. It's on the program. You can't even change the set list. Like, it's there. It has been decided. Here's what you're playing. You step out there and perfection is what we're expecting. It's just, it blows my mind. And I think at some point I need to try it. I need to try to set up like an actual classical performance of some kind. And this is fueled by that phrase of like, whatever you're scared of is probably what you should be doing next. I'm terrified of that.
Well, please tell me if you decide to do it, when and where, because I'd love to be there.
Well, you won't be able to attend. I've already told you this. You can't watch. You need to leave. As soon as the curtain opens, I need to know that you are gone. But I'm curious what are the tips? What do you, you've said preparation, just sheer preparation is the number one thing. What are the other tips that because this is not something that my piano professors told me. They never said like, hey, when you go out there to do your jury, here are some ways that you can kind of clear your head. That was not a part of the conversation. What do you say to your students?
Well, these are things I've also had to learn, I would say, on my own. Yeah, preparation's key. And you were saying earlier that we have, a fixed program. A lot of times we have to give that program 1 or 2 years in advance because
Oh my
the
gosh.
seasons are booked 1 or 2 years in advance. And,
Wow.
what we're playing right now and what we might feel like playing in 2 years is not necessarily the same. And
Right.
so that in itself can be quite stressful and frustrating, but it's something that I do love to do, which is to put together nice programs that have, as you talk about, like have a flow between them, have a connection between the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
I often like to program either lesser played, lesser known classical works or very famous composers, but lesser played, lesser known works from them.
Right.
And so there's always something, I might have like a quite standard classical program, and then there'll be one more contemporary composer that maybe people don't know as much or haven't heard as much. That for me, I find this connection between the pieces, and I also love to talk to my audience before. It's something that, for example, we don't generally get to do as classical artists.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much this like invisible wall where we're on stage and we have to be in our, perfect little dresses and fancy suits and tuxes and whatever. And the audience is sitting there, pin drop silence, which, okay, is appreciated while we're playing
Yeah.
because it requires a lot of concentration. But then we miss that human connection.
Right. Yeah.
And so for me, one of the things I love to do is actually to introduce my program to an audience whenever I'm playing a solo recital, whenever I can. I always do this, and I speak to them. It's not a music history lecture. It's just 2-3 minutes about what the program is and what it means to me and some things that I think they might find interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, it immediately breaks that barrier down between me and the audience and allows them also to see who I am as a person.
Right. Don't you think that is in some way you wanting to tell the audience there's more of me than just this performance that you're going to see? And maybe, because I'm just speaking for myself, I think that some of the things that I do, I'm wanting to buy some other layers of grace. You know what I mean? Like one of the biggest things that I need when I go on stage to feel like the show is going well is I need to hear the audience laugh. I need to make them laugh. And I'm not trying to be a stand-up comedian. I will never get up on stage and do stand-up. Yes, I'm scared of it, but that's not something that I need to be doing.
But you are very funny.
Well, thank you. But that is part of me. And I think probably like underneath it is a way of me sort of buying grace for a potential, like, what if this doesn't go well? It's like self-preservation a little bit, like you want to connect and you want to step out on stage and you want to say something to the audience. You want them to hear your voice. It's even a little bit more intimate, but it just buys you a little bit of goodwill, maybe. I don't want to speak for you, but I think that that's the motivation for me.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I don't think I would have thought about it that way, but I think you're right. It is a way for me to have them hear my voice and see my personality, because who I am at the piano is obviously very, like, the way I look or the way I am at the piano is obviously very different from when I'm speaking or when I'm laughing or having a drink with friends, or
Right,
obviously it's
right.
very different. I'm very much concentrated. I'm very much in the zone, but yes, as you say, I think that does give me some grace. I don't think I'm funny and I don't try to be funny, but I also appreciate if I'm saying something and I'm giving some fact about the composer or some tidbit and the audience laughs.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
They
there's
kind of
something
like me.
so powerful about that. Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm just like seeking outside approval, but
Oh, aren't we all? Always.
But going back to your question earlier, beyond all of that, I do have some of my own pre-concert rituals that work for me, and it's not only the day of or right before, but it's also what I practice in the practice room.
Uh-huh.
One of the most important things that I've learned is breath work.
Okay.
Now, as a singer, I think you probably breathe well.
I have no idea.
But as a pianist, we can play holding our breath for like, and however long one can hold their breath, if it's 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And what that does, unfortunately, is to contract the muscles and retain that tension.
Right.
And then our muscles aren't getting oxygen. The flow within our body is very blocked. And that actually limits the physical, technical capacity of what we can do with our instruments.
Yeah.
And so this is something I teach a lot. One of the injuries that I had in my life actually came from apparently not breathing properly. And so after that, I started to actually practice deep diaphragmatic breathing, which of course people who have done a lot of yoga or meditation, they learn this. And classical singers, wind players, brass players, they generally learn these things because you cannot physically make a sound without exhaling.
Right.
But as a pianist and a string player, you can play and hold your breath, and it's very damaging.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's something that that also helps, of course, to calm any nerves or just get my heart rate in a good kind of quiet, peaceful place. But I think the most important thing for me, which is very, very subjective, is that I need to eat before I play.
Okay. Is there
a full meal?
A full meal? How, like right before?
Maybe an hour and a half or so,
Okay.
hour and a half before. I need to feel not like I'm going to throw up full, but like I'm satisfied and full.
Yeah.
Because if I don't eat, I get really low blood sugar and I get very jittery and nervous.
Yeah.
And when I've eaten, I feel relaxed and calm. And so the two things, I take a nap and I eat. Those are the two things on concert days.
Okay. So concert days, you're walking out on stage at 7:30.
Yeah.
When does this start? 2:00, you take a nap?
Yeah. About after lunch or so. Yeah.
Okay. And then
I'll nap for an hour or two, then, get up, have my shower, do my hair, makeup, whatever, blah, blah, and eat.
And the meal is?
Generally protein and carbs. Yeah. So chicken and rice, tofu and veggies, eggs and potatoes, whatever, something like this.
Do you have if you're playing a lot of Chopin, it's tofu, which makes no sense.
No, actually the tofu is more because I try to be vegetarian and vegan most of the time. But when I'm traveling, very often it's not easy, especially in Europe. If I'm in France or Switzerland or Italy, it's not easy to find tofu and lentils if I'm staying in a hotel.
Eating while you're traveling is rough. Yeah. It's getting easier, but it's rough.
But a lot of things are rough traveling, I have to say. And this is, again, something that I think we share across genres, which is this concept of go, go, go with every concert and having to always be on. And something we often don't talk about is even the loneliness that we can feel on tour.
Mm-hmm.
And you were saying that half the time you travel with your band, but half the time it's alone.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know what your experience is with that and how you deal with it, because it's been a big journey for me to learn the difference between loneliness and solitude.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like you would think maybe the solo tours are more lonely than the band tours, and that's definitely not the case. I also should say I never tour actually alone. I always have a tour manager and or a sound guy or something like that. But I really, the first 7 years that I was touring, Amy, my wife, and Amy came out on the road, and all those tours were full band, and the band was still is like a family, and so we were always together. It felt very communal, and in a really, really I'm so grateful for it, in a really helpful, healthy way. And so now when I go out on the road, even if it is, a solo tour, my tour manager and we have our separate days. I like to put headphones on and walk around Philadelphia all day. I like to go. I got my coffee spot in every city. Go get my coffee. I'll be walking around the city all day long until I need to go to sound check. So I am by myself, and maybe it's because, we have kids and we have plenty of community and social time in my normal life here in Nashville, but I'm fine with it. I love the solitude of it. Now I definitely can't be away from my family for more than, I think the longest I've ever been away from them was 12 days.
Mm.
And it's just excruciating. I just don't do it anymore. I think that last time that happened was in 2016. I just can't do it anymore. So thankfully, I'm able to have some flexibility. I have to travel for sure, but I'm able to schedule it so that I'm not leaving for, weeks and weeks at a time for sure. But yeah, it can get, there's only so much solitude that I need. And so once that's met, it's just those are the times that I'm grateful for, the family and the friends that I can reach out to. It must have been so much harder back in the day when we didn't have FaceTime and cell phones and all. I mean, like this conversation right here would not have been possible. So I'm really grateful for that kind of
Wow.
stuff. But I really, and last thing I'll say, and this sounds so cheesy, but if I'm really honest, it's really true. At this point in my career, I feel like there really is a connection with the people who come out to the shows. When I go to Seattle, that first 2-3 rows, it's a lot of familiar faces. Like they're at every show, and I'm so grateful for them. And we're not going to dinner after the show, but we're there together for an hour and a half, so that feels like real connection. So it's not as lonely, thankfully, as maybe you would think if you're looking at a schedule.
Wow, I love that. And I love that you mentioned your family. I saw your Instagram post from Disney World the other
Oh
day,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I loved seeing that post because it's one of the things I admire and respect about you. To see an artist that you do admire reflecting values that
Mm-hmm.
you yourself find important is a really beautiful thing. And I think that valuing family and those closest to you also helps us to stay grounded in the kind of craziness of our world. And so I think you've kind of answered it, but I did want to ask you, what are some of the things that help you to stay grounded in this industry?
Yeah. I mean, again, those years when Amy was out on the road were so literally foundational. I think if we had done it some other way, we would just have a different life. I don't know. Who knows what it would be? But I just think that the fact that she knows, like when I'm on the road and I'm in San Francisco at whatever venue, she's like, yeah, she knows that green room. She can picture where I am, and that helps her feel connected to me, and that helps me know that I'm not just out in the ether leaving my family behind. It just, we feel connected in that way. And again, like I said earlier, having kids is, it's such, for me, was just such a shift in such a really like relaxing, shoulder dropping way of just being in the world. It just made me feel like, oh, and maybe it's just as simple as, at the end of the day, whatever happens on any given day or when I'm on the road, I'm coming home as Luca and Livy's dad. That's as far as I can fall. Like I'm good.
Talking about identity.
Right, exactly. I think it really all comes down to identity, and wherever that peg is for each person, the more grounded it is in something, that I think the easier it is to live your life. And my faith is very important to me as well, and that's not my personality is more sort of, I'm not like a Bible thumper out on stage, but I have the tattoos that I do have are my girls' names, Amy included in the girls, and then the cross and my favorite Bible verse. That those things, these are all the things tattooed on my arms, are the way that I stay grounded.
It's your foundation.
Yeah. Also, I love tattoos.
I'm right there with you. I mean, you have a beautiful family,
Thank you.
and I think that they're really lucky to have you as a dad, because to hear you talk about them and to hear how much you prioritize them, I think is such a beautiful thing. We talk
Mm.
often about mothers and how it's difficult for them to travel being an artist,
Yeah.
a traveling artist, but we don't always talk about how fathers feel.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hesitate sometimes to really play the dad, parent, kids card, because I recognize that there are people out there who want to have kids and don't have kids, or don't want to have kids. And I don't want to, I'm only speaking for myself. But yeah, that's just been such a foundational, huge thing in my life. And I have to say, in my personal experience, thinking of moms and dads and expectations and double standards, all that kind of stuff, it's like I in no way have it harder than my wife. I mean, my wife and the mom artists out there traveling, it's just like my hat is off to them. It's tough.
Well, on behalf of all women, we say thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today. It was an absolute privilege to talk to you.
I was so honored. Thank you for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the support from each and every one of you. If you would like to submit any questions or topics for us to address on the show, you can send us a message on our Instagram page @Conscious Artist Podcast. Help us to spread more awareness by sharing this episode with your friends, your colleagues, your teachers, and your students. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sending you all so much love and strength to tackle this week, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode of The Conscious Artist.